Our first scripture reading is from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 12, verses 38 to 44. Hear now the word of God. As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk in long robes, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of apparent say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." This is the word of God.
Please be to God.
Let us open our hymnals to Steal Away, number 527. Stephanie will sing the verse, and we will join in the chorus.
This morning, as we steal away to Jesus, our second reading comes in the first book of Kings, chapter 17, verses 8 through 16. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, saying, "Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I have commanded a widow there to feed you." So Elijah sent out and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel so that I may drink." As she was going to bring it, he called to her again and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." But she said, "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said, but first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth." She went and did as Elijah said, so that she as well as he and her household ate for many days. The jar of meal was not empty, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Friends, this is the word of God. Thanks be to God. So this morning in the lectionary, the cycle that we use, the set of readings that are scheduled for each week, we have 2 stories about widows. One may be more familiar than the other. I think that first widow story might be a little more familiar, and it's so closely tied to our ideas about how we should give our money that maybe some of you are now thinking to yourselves, "Oh no, she is going to talk about stewardship this fall." Yeah, I know. I think we might get out of it, right? Because we have been talking about raising money for most of this year. And I do want to talk about stewardship, but hopefully not in the way that you think or dread. Beyond the way we use our resources, rather than a lesson that we should give until we've got nothing left, these 2 widows want to teach us about the power we have, the power God has given us, and how to use it. As I said, that first widow we heard this morning is very well known to us, who out of her poverty put 2 coins in the temple treasury, all she had to live on, Jesus says. And it was a better gift than anyone else put in. That's what Jesus told the people he was talking to. This woman, unnamed, undefined by family ties or social safety nets, Jesus holds her up as the example not only of faithfulness, but of powerful giving. In contrast to all the other people in that story we would normally say have got power, right? The scribes, the people who wear long robes, the rich people who give large sums, the person in whom God's power is located is this poor widow. At her 2 pennies, that ridiculously Jesus says are worth more than anything anyone else put into the offering. Now the second widow's story is maybe a little bit less familiar. We heard this story from the book of 1 Kings about the widow of Zarephath. That's as much of a name as we have for her, but it's not meaningless. It tells us something about her. Calling her a widow, first, denotes the most important part of her social standing in the ancient Near East. Society was structured around families where power was located in male figures, fathers, husbands, sometimes brothers. Women were parts of these family groups through which they had access to family farms or businesses and the resources to procure food and shelter and clothing and protection under the law. Without a man, a widow was a woman without a family structure, without a place in society, without means of taking care of herself or any others under her own care. She was vulnerable in more ways than one. We might be familiar with this idea of the vulnerability of ancient widows in the ancient world because of the things that we've read in the Bible, even the psalm we read today as part of our call to worship. The things we've read about taking care of widows and orphans, about ruling justly on their behalf, about providing for their needs. God's people have always been commanded to care for those among them who are the most vulnerable. But the Bible's strong insistence on care for widows probably also reveals that widows were not always cared for otherwise in every ancient society. And so we learn from the second part of this widow's title, the widow of Zarephath, that she does not live with the people of God in a society founded on care for the orphan and widow. In fact, she lives just about as far from that society as imaginable, in a place called Sidon. Sidon is the home of Queen Jezebel, not known for her charity, grace, or goodness, known in fact for murdering God's prophets. Sidon is not a place where people worship the God of Israel, the God of Elijah, but our story starts with God sending Elijah just there. Right before this story begins, Elijah has run out of food because there's a drought, and he is really at the end of his rope. And this is God's solution to help him. And to an ancient audience, God's words to Elijah would have sounded like a really good punchline. Elijah, you're going to starve to death because of the drought? Don't worry, I've got a widow in Sidon who will help you. A foreign widow is the last person they would have expected to be the hero of the story, let alone be able to help him. But this is what God says. And so Elijah goes. Now when God tells Elijah to go to the town of Zarephath in Sidon, God says, I have commanded a widow there to feed you. We might assume that God has already spoken with this widow, and she would not be perhaps surprised by the arrival of a road-weary traveler with a rather demanding temperament. When they meet at the gate of Zarephath, the widow is gathering sticks for a fire, and Elijah, who must be parched from his journey, not to mention the drought, calls out to her, bring me some water so I can have a drink. No, please. No, you happen to have some water to spare. No, and that's why I think maybe God has already spoken with her, because what would keep her from responding, are you nuts? There's a drought, get your own water. But she simply goes to do as he asks. Then Elijah pushes his luck just a little bit too far. Bring me some bread, too. As the Lord your God lives, she calls back, I have only a handful of flour and a little oil. I'm about to make it up for myself and my son so we can eat one more meal before we die. Because we're primed to see the widow as someone who needs help, it's really easy to interpret what she says as kind of pathetic, right? I have only a handful of flour and a little oil. I've been gathering these sticks to make one last fire, to bake one last bit of bread for my son and myself. And then we will eat it and die. I think there's great power in this woman who herself is the only thing standing between Elijah and death as well. As the Lord your God lives, she says to Elijah, almost a challenge. I've got only a very little bit of food left. It's about to be our last meal. Does she believe that God will provide? Is she incensed that she's being asked to share what little she had to begin with? Is she so tired and broken down from the daily struggle of scrimping and advocating for herself and her child that she has just made peace with whatever comes next? We don't know, but we can imagine. What happens next, however, is something we rarely imagine. It's all right, Elijah calls back, seemingly unmoved by her plight. Just bring me some of the bread you make first. And maybe she stood there staring at him in surprise over his rudeness, because Elijah continues, listen to what God says. The jar of meal will not be empty, and the jug of oil will not fail until the drought is over. Did she believe him? Had God said the same thing to her in that earlier conversation? I don't know, but she went ahead and did what Elijah asked her to do, and all of them ate for many days. And the prophet of God relied on the hospitality of a foreign widow who saved his life. In both of these stories, there are people who are supposed to have power. The scribes, the rich, God's chosen prophet. They're the same people we attribute power to today, right? Government leaders, wealthy and famous people. After the elections this week, it's clear citizens of this country believe power lies with our elected officials, as all sides campaigned and rallied and voted and interpreted the results with a renewed fervor. In Cameroon, a group of boys were abducted from school, in a place where men with guns have increasing power. And though they were returned, they'll not be without the scars of their nation's struggle for power at the level of presidents and ministers and armies and militias. And because by and large none of us really fit into those groups we've named, we're not government officials or rich and famous or militia leaders, it's very easy for us to think and feel like we are powerless. The stories of two powerful widows today leave me wondering if we have completely misunderstood God's power. Wondering what we might find ourselves to be capable of if we began to see that God's power lies within each and every one of us. For example, aside from the $9,000 in matching grants we received, the members of this congregation raised about $10,000 beyond our usual giving in one summer. That's 10% of our annual budget. Kind of an amazing accomplishment. But that mustard seed that began with one generous offer of a $5,000 matching grant, that faithful risk we took together, God honored and transformed into nearly $40,000. It feels as miraculous to me as the widow's flour and oil lasting longer than they should have. And I hope you see that the money that came in, especially the money that came from outside of this place, is a testament to the power of this community, to the power of your story, to the power of your diversity, to the power of your joy, to the power of God at work among us. Yes, it is stewardship season, and this is a stewardship sermon. But I'm not going to tell you to put your two last pennies in the plate. Instead, God invites us to become stewards of the power that God has given to each one of us, to recognize where God's power truly lies. What would we each be capable of if we understood this? What would we as a community be able to do? I believe we are about to find out. This anniversary year, this elevator campaign, are only just the beginning for us. The world's needs are enormous. We know that as well as the widow in the midst of a drought knew there was nothing left to eat. but God's power is bigger, more unpredictable, more abundant than any fear or pain that we could encounter. With God, all things are possible. And so may the stewardship of our lives begin there.